Operators and investors of for-profit businesses. Built and sold a $250 million consumer products brand called And One over the last several decades. And in leaving that part of my professional life and starting this one, had literally hundreds of conversations with social entrepreneurs and social investors about what was necessary to scale this marketplace of sustainable business and social enterprise. And what came out of that was that there was a bunch of infrastructure that was missing in this marketplace that exists in the traditional for-profit marketplace. And that if you wanted to marry the power of the markets with the purpose of the nonprofit sector, we need to build some of that infrastructure to help support those entrepreneurs and those investors. And so we took all those threads, some legal threads, some standards threads, and some branding threads from our consumer products background, and wove them together into this thing called the B Corporation. You've all heard of C and S Corps. Well, they're now something called a B Corp. And a B Corp is a new kind of company that uses the power of business to solve social and environmental problems. And there's two things that distinguish a B Corp from a traditional business, even a traditional socially responsible or green or sustainable business. The first thing is that they meet higher standards of social and environmental performance and accountability. And we'll talk about both of those things in turn. And the second is that they amplify voice for a very diverse marketplace through the power of a unifying brand. Because it's, as you can imagine and you know from your own experience, it's quite cluttered and confusing out there. On the standards front, because empty claims without standards are just that, when everybody claims to be the same thing, then those things mean less and less. So on the performance standards side, all B corporations meet a comprehensive and transparent set of standards through achieving a minimum score on something called the B impact rating system that measures their impact on their employees, their consumers, their community, and the environment. Beyond their performance at a particular point in time, the question is, how are these companies built to last? How do you build companies whose mission can be built to last over the life cycle of the business, not just the founding charismatic CEO or Jeff? So outside of the performance standards, there's also accountability standards, which is the segue into the good work that Suze is doing in California, is how do you bake into the DNA of the business and institutionalize the values that lead somebody to create a company as cool as New Leaf Paper? How do you enable it to go through successive management, capital raises, succession planning, IPO, sales, acquisitions, and scale the good in that business, scale that high oxytocin business? And so B corporations, in addition to meeting a high standard of performance, are also legally expanding their corporate responsibilities to include consideration of the impact of the decisions, not only on their shareholders, but also on their employees, their suppliers, their community, and the environment. Why do B Corps matter? B Corps matter because standards matter. And this is my lame attempt to be graphic with everybody. So if you type in standards and leverage into Google Images, what you get is Archimedes and the lever. And so what companies like New Leaf Paper are looking for is a big old lever to move markets, whether they're capital markets or consumer markets. And standards give you the measure, give you the leverage to move consumer and capital. Why do B Corps matter as far as impact? Well, if you want to drive social impact, you have to use standards. Consumers want to make sure they're supporting sustainable business or not just green marketing. Investors want to put their money not just behind sort of reactive SRI, negative screening, but behind a new asset class of high impact investments. Policymakers want to create sustainable procurement initiatives or tax incentives for sustainable business. And larger companies want to implement sustainable supply chain initiatives. None of that can happen without standards. Otherwise, all you get is oatmeal. That was my reference to the cooking show before. On the accountability side, this isn't exactly the right framing from a legal standpoint, but just the big picture here is, how do you expand corporate accountability? If the 20th century was the century of shareholder capitalism, what we're in transition towards is a century of stakeholder capitalism. The basic operating system of the 20th century corporation was to maximize shareholder value exclusively. The DNA of the corporation in the 21st century is going to be different. It's going to be empowering entrepreneurs and investors to create and invest in companies that are trying to create social and shareholder value simultaneously. This is all wonderful as an abstract concept. They're actually a diverse and growing community of companies that have held themselves, again, voluntarily accountable This is a very market-based approach to those higher standards. There are financial services companies like leaders in community development banking, like Shore Bank, leading national consumer products companies, some of whom have spoken here before, business service companies, law firms, paper businesses, office supply companies, and folks both here and abroad in fair trade or in pharma at the bottom of the pyramid. But it's not just companies that are evidence of this emerging. It's also a marketplace. There's a whole group of folks that are emerging to use those standards for their own purposes. We'll talk more about this at some other point. The basic idea is that there's a huge historic opportunity in front of us, whether it was Gates talking about creative capitalism at Davos last year or Tom Friedman discovering true cost accounting in recent editorials. An increasing chorus of mainstream voices are getting on board, and the wind is at this community's back. That has all been accelerated by the financial crisis. How do we seize that opportunity? How do we create the market infrastructure that enables this community to scale? That's what B Lab, the nonprofit organization that we founded, is doing, and the B corporations like New Leaf Paper and Numi Tea and a bunch of other ones that will be here over the next couple of days presenting. They're defining a marketplace. Those leading companies define a marketplace that creates a marketplace, and ultimately in a generation that builds a new sector of the economy, one company at a time. And it starts with the legal infrastructure that Suze is working on.